If it isn't abundantly clear, dear fellowship, I am a huge fan of Dimension 20. I love the cast, I love Brennan and his DM style, but most of all, I love the intricate sets and minis. Is that any surprise to y'all? Of course not. I decided I wanted to up my own technical skills and emulate my heroes, so I really dug in to figure out how all of it was done. I'll be separating this out into 2 videos, one about the minis and one about the sets, mainly because I'm running out of time to work on this video. All of my ideas tend to balloon out of scope incredibly easily, and that's why it's just audio today. We'll start with where they tend to source their miniatures, which is, well, I'll let Rick Perry explain that.
The world of miniatures is so broad that kind of like, you really know one company kind of makes everything, and they have kind of like little settings and things that they sort of specialize in. So, but those are companies that we worked with, a lot, like Reaper and Mantic both have really huge lines, huge variety of stuff, and for us, it's kind of like whatever gets the job done. We love to buy a mini off the shelf and just paint it if we can, but the kind of like mashup style of Dimension 20 necessitates a lot of times that we're doing a lot of custom work, whether it's kit bashing or 3D printing or 3D sculpting and printing or full scratch sculpt or whatever. A lot of times we're doing some extra steps to get that like specificity.
So that answer is very straightforward, but it's also filled with a bunch of keywords that we'll talk about. There's quite a few places that have miniatures for sale, from large all-encompassing ranges to small 1 or 2 model sellers. The few he mentioned, Mantic and Reaper, are well-known miniature producers who make a range of different types of models. Mantic focuses a lot on its own games, such as Kings of War or Firefight, and Reaper has a bunch of ranges made of different materials, often centering around role-playing games like D&D rather than war games. There are so many companies that sell minis, and that's a good thing, because that means there are options to choose from when it comes to creating new minis from the old. This is where kit bashing comes into play. Kit bashing is taking one part of a model and using it on a different model. This can be as simple as swapping a head, or as unique as having a different piece for every body part. You can see this tons in the minis used across the different series, but I believe it's most easily seen in a Crown of Candy miniatures. I'll let Rick explain.
The good thing that Ravening War has going for it is it's a medieval type setting, so certainly a lot of medieval type miniatures out there. Since we were returning to this world, we already kind of did some development work of like, how do we tackle making these kind of food things, and one of the big revelations from Crown of Candy was these little like food cabochons. So they're like these, a lot of them come from Japan, but they're these cute little food things that people glue onto like their phones or whatever, that you can use as decorations or make a magnet out of. And so finding those, like, aha, this is about the size of a miniature, and we can take these and kit bash them. So we had a lot of like knowledge going into it, so that was helpful,
And since I want to be thorough with this video, I'm going to show my own example of kit bashing. We'll start with this model of Slambo that I got a while back. I cut off the tip of the horns, I got the 2 axes and replaced them with shovel heads, and you've got yourself a grimdark shovel knight. You can also digitally kit bash, which is something I am not at all qualified to talk about, so I'm leaving the Googling and YouTube searching to you. Now let's touch on the other ways of getting minis that he mentions. We'll start with scratch sculpting. This is the most art feeling to me, even if it's all art. I can't sculpt for shit, but my partner can. And here's a work in progress for my partner's rat army, a rat ogre that they're sculpting as an opossum. This can be done on smaller levels as well, like sculpting items on top of models, like this cloak I sculpted for my hobbit thief Bilbo. Bilbo has seen a lot in the war. You can also digitally sculpt, and technically I can do a bit of that like I showed how to do in my last video with the name tags, but that takes an entirely different skill than the ones that I have. And then there's 3D printing, and I'll let Rick explain their use of 3D minis.
Cool thing about 3D printing versus like a Reaper or someone who makes a physical miniature is, there's so many talented people out there, and you don't have to have the whole apparatus of the manufacturing process and all the facilities. You could just sculpt something on your computer and put it out there, and then people can print it at home. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So that means there's a lot of options out there. It also means that we can hire people to 3D sculpt stuff original stuff for us, and we've done it a lot, and then print them out. So yeah, it's a great process. The resin and the printing, it all just keeps getting better and better and cheaper, and so it's definitely an awesome thing.
This is also something I've talked about on my own channel. If you want to get into 3D printing yourself, you can go and check out my video on how much it will cost you up in the corner. These are examples of what 3D prints look like, and you can find them all over the web, but a great place to start looking is initially on Yegi or Thangs.com, which can both search multiple sites, but if you just want to browse, I suggest Cults 3D or My Mini Factory. Now, as a treat, I'm going to show you how you can easily make your own custom A Crown of Candy and the Ravening War OC in a few different ways. Firstly, we'll make a humanoid model by taking a basic WizKids Mini that you can find at most friendly local game stores and just paint him up fun, food-based colors. This is Sir Spencer Wildfree, a high-ranking spinach paladin of the Volbian Church, who has been granted a holy sword made of water steel due to his commitment to the church. He rose in the ranks of the church in Vegetania after the Ravening War, but before the war depicted in A Crown of Candy, during the time of relative peace. He is then slain off-screen by Saccharina's dragon during its rampages in the final few episodes. Another one we can do is by scratch modeling. This is a bit cheeky of me, but I made a herd of sprinkles roaming the candy fields by cutting up a toothpick and gluing it to a small milliput base, and then painting and flocking it. Finally, we'll combine 3D printing with kit bashing by making this little guy. I made a model of a hot dog, and then I took the legs and swords from a one-page rules model, and then with the help of my partner, who did all of the sculpting on this, basically combined all of those together into Willy Wonder Greyfuel, someone who lives in the seedy underbelly of Kamada, and having connections throughout Calorum, he can get you anything you want, for a price of course. Thus the nickname Wonder, that and the reference to a Wonder Bread bun. It was also surprisingly difficult to actually get done, because the print failed the first time around, and the green stuff sculpting was being really finicky for some reason. But he's done now, and I love him. I hope this gives you a glimpse into how miniatures are made for the Dimension 20 shows, as well as how to make your own specialty minis for your home games or armies. It's incredibly easy to kit bash, and if you keep your eye out for different little things you can use, you'll have a great time making your own. And that's all for today's sermon. Thank you so much for coming around. Be sure to thank the patrons I currently have, such as Alex at the $10 tier. If you'd like to be a part of the fellowship and see my videos a week early, you can tie it to my Patreon for as little as $1. And as always, may the algorithm bless you and keep you, and in the name of the like, subscribe, and holy bell, amen. Speaking of the minis, have you ever considered with the NPCs or the player characters, creating a production line of them for, like, because you did do the box, I don't know if that was your team or if that was just Dropout that did the box of Doom that was made out of resin.
Yeah.
Have y'all considered doing that for like a line of miniatures?
Yeah.
Like a small line?
Totally. Well, so, all the merchandise is from like Dropout, called Jimmer the Company. Randy McKay is our merch guy over there, who does a great job with all that stuff. It's always exciting to see what he cooks up. And so they did the box of Doom. Like, we made the original one, and then they were like, we want to make a product of it. And they consulted with me a little bit just about some paint questions and stuff, but really, like, that was wholly from Dropout. And I haven't heard anything about miniatures, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's definitely an idea that's come up in the past, so it seems like inevitable that at some point they'll do something like that, so.
On average, how many extra minis do you think get made but don't get shown on screen per season?
Usually a handful, sometimes none. It just depends on the season, but basically it costs money to make all this stuff. So, the show is not trying to spend money, and I don't want to spend money and resources on things that don't get on screen. I'd rather put every penny on screen trying to make it as cool as possible, so that means, trying, and that's why we are, we're going to shoot a season here in a month, and we've been working we're building stuff right now in the shop, and we've been working on a season for a couple of months already, planning and prepping. So it's a lot of it's just a lot of like development work and planning with the dungeon masters to try to make a battles and materials that will get used and don't feel like it's just a railroad and all these sort of things. So it's like this really funny little fiddly process, but yeah,
Sure.
we try to use everything. And sometimes we'll be at the end of a season and I'll be like, oh, we didn't use these. Maybe these could show up in this battle, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
When creating the player characters minis, do they give you an idea of their character beforehand, but has like the full detail been fleshed out, or is some of the character like physical nature left up to the team, your team?
Yeah, well, it varies depending on the person. Some people are really verbose and send lots of reference images and have a really strong sense for what it is that they want. And some people are not. Some people are like, well, here's broad strokes, and they want to leave it up to us to interpret. We, in the process of it, we kind of collate all the notes from character creation, and then we pull reference, and we sort of make a deck, like a presentation deck that has cards for each PC. And mostly in the past we've used Hero Forge, not always, but mostly we've used Hero Forge to create things, which is great software for like really rapidly kind of iterating stuff. And so some places we're interpreting what they want, and looking at like abilities, like looking at the character sheet and thinking about how is this character going to be played during the game? Is this a ranged character? Is this a melee character? And thinking about what they may be expressing in a moment of combat and trying to distill that. So sometimes we're doing a lot of that work. A lot of times we're just trying to honor the requests from the player, but always, that is just a starting point, right? Because like once you get into it, it's like, well, actually, if you put this sword in this hand and you do this or this, it gives it a little bit more. Or actually, if we painted all that color that they asked for, then you wouldn't be able to see the face. So let's tweak this costume detail, or let's do. And then we run that stuff past the cast typically at some point to get, feedback and make sure that we're, that when the mini shows up, it's not going to be like wholly different than what they're thinking or whatever. But yeah, that's our process.
Fantastic. It sounds incredibly fun.